Hey everybody, it's Jeff from New York and we're downtown Las Vegas right off of Fremont Street. We're going to check out the National Museum of Organized Crime and Law Enforcement, otherwise known as the Mob Museum. The museum's only 2 blocks away from Fremont Street. You just take 3rd Avenue 2 blocks north until you can't go any further. That's Stewart Avenue. The museum's right in front of you. So don't be a wise guy, be a good fella and follow me inside. So if you're a regular viewer of the New York channel, and I hope you are, you know one of my museum tips is if you're arriving at a museum first thing in the morning, always go to the very top floor first and work your way down. That's because everyone that's entering the building most likely will start at the bottom floor and work their way up, and this way you avoid all the crowds. You meet them about halfway down. It's a really good tip. We're getting here at the Mob Museum at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so it really doesn't apply here, but out of habit, we're starting off on the 3rd floor, which is the top floor here. So as you can see, there's a small theater up here on the 3rd floor, and the 3rd floor basically goes over the origins of the mob in America, which can be traced to urban ghettos in the late 19th century where Irish, Italian, and Eastern European Jewish immigrants struggled to survive amid poverty, overcrowding, and discrimination. These immigrants could only get the most dangerous and low-paying jobs, and a few of the new arrivals took shortcuts to the American dream, forming street gangs, crime syndicates, and engaging in robbery, extortion, counterfeiting, and other illicit schemes. The rise of organized crime compelled law enforcement agencies to become more professional and sophisticated in their investigative techniques. Police often use lineups to help witnesses identify criminal suspects. The first decade of the 20th century, the public was unsettled by frequent headlines about the Black Hand, which demanded cash from business owners under threat that their shops would be burned down or their children kidnapped. New York police detective Joseph Petrosino gained fame for his aggressive pursuit of the Black Hand extortionists. Meanwhile, U.S. Secret Service Chief William Flynn took down a counterfeiting ring that was run by New York's first mafia family. The rough streets of America's cities taught harsh lessons to the boys that would become the century's most notorious mobsters, including Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Bubsy Siegel, and Al Capone. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I'm taking a lot of this commentary from the Mob Museum website. I'll put a link to that website below in the description of this video. It's a really great website, very educational. I really encourage you guys to visit that after you watch this video. So, the mob didn't create Las Vegas. That credit goes to railroad builder William Clark, who created the original town site in 1905 at the halfway point of his rail route between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles. Clark sold lots, and a town sprouted up besides the track. A red light district called Block 16 provided prostitution and gambling for the miners who came to town after a long, hot months of digging in the desert. The construction of the Hoover Dam and Nevada's legalization of gambling, both in 1931, spurred Las Vegas's growth. The first casinos, sporting neon signs, lined Fremont Street, which is just 2 blocks from here, creating what became known as the Glitter Gulch. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which banned the manufacture, distribution, and sale of alcohol in America, took effect in 1920. Temperance advocates celebrated prohibition, but so did savvy members of organized crime. Recognizing that many people still would want to imbibe, the mob created an underground booze market. They made bootleg moonshine and beer, smuggled the good stuff into the country from Canada and the Caribbean, and opened secret saloons called speakeasies in cities around the country. Prohibition enforcement was meager at best, and too few federal agents and indifferent local police allowed the mob to get rich by giving the people what they wanted. This is Mitzi, the rubber ducky showgirl, who shows up on all my Vegas videos. As most of you know, there are hidden mascots, or some of you call them Easter eggs, in my videos. Mitzi shows up in all the Vegas ones. Sometimes she's easy to spot, other times she's quite elusive, so keep your eyes open while watching the video. If you spot her, note the time in the comments below, and if you're the first one, you'll get a shout out on an upcoming video.
The warehouse where the massacre occurred stood until 1967. Before the building was demolished, the bricks that made up the massacre wall were numbered and carefully
Now, a commercial garage on the north side of Chicago was the setting for the most horrific shooting in mob history, the St. Valentine Day Massacre. On February 14, 1929, 7 members and associates of the George Bugs Moran's bootlegging gang were lined up against a wall and shot dead inside a garage at 2122 North Clark Street. Al Capone's Chicago outfit was widely suspected of ordering the hit, but no one was ever prosecuted. When the garage was slated for demolition in 1967, entrepreneur George Patay recovered the bricks from the wall. 300 of those bricks are on display here at the Mob Museum. And here, my New Yorkers, is where Jeff from New York screwed up big time because I thought I was standing next to just a plain old brick wall, but these 300 bricks next to me are actually 300 bricks from the actual St. Valentine's Day Massacre. You could actually see bullet holes in these bricks. I'm going to stop the video right here so you can get a better look, but sorry for the bad quality. I can't believe I missed the importance of that wall and a great photo opportunity at the same time, but I guess I'll just chalk it up to a couple of vodka with lemon twists back at the hotel room. After the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in February 14, 1929, one of the nation's foremost forensic scientists, Dr. Calvin Goddard, was hired to examine the ballistic evidence. Goddard compared the bullets collected from the crime scene with the test bullets fired by a range of firearms. He eventually found that the .45 caliber bullets from the crime scene matched 2 Thompson submachine guns confiscated from a rural Michigan home of a notorious mob hitman. Some of that ballistic evidence collected from the massacre scene is on display right here. If you plan on visiting Vegas in the near future, check out the link below in the description. 50 things to do and tips while visiting Las Vegas.
From New York to LA, bootleg wars turn the streets into battlegrounds.
As the mob prospered during Prohibition, law enforcement agencies found themselves overmatched by the clever and violent crime syndicates. New and legal powers and more firepower were needed to combat this growing threat. The Bureau of Narcotics took on the mob's role in drug trafficking, and the Treasury Department's intelligence unit probed the tax records of crime kingpins. J. Edgar Hoover established the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI, or otherwise known as the G-Men, as the nation's primary law enforcement agency, and Congress passed laws to expand police powers. These efforts saw results. Crime bosses such as Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, and Louis Buchliater were taken down, but the mob was far from finished. Mob bosses rarely paid the price for their thieving and murderous acts. Witnesses often were afraid to testify, and jurors were paid off to ensure not guilty verdicts. But if mobsters didn't pay their income taxes, well, they could run into big trouble. Just ask Al Capone, the Chicago bootlegging boss who found himself serving time in Alcatraz for dodging the taxman. The Treasury Department's intelligence unit, known as the T-Men, built cases that would put away Capone and many other mobsters and corrupt public officials in the 1930s and 40s. Wow, talk about a hot seat. Unfortunately, it's a replica. I was hoping for the real thing, but the plaque clearly states that this is a replica of an electric chair.
The public was repulsed, afraid, fascinated. The tentacles of organized crime, it seemed, were everywhere.
After Prohibition, the mob needed new criminal opportunities to exploit, and it found plenty. Sports fixing, illegal gambling, drug trafficking, and Hollywood extortion schemes were just some of the rackets that helped transform America's bootlegging gangs into a national crime syndicate. Charles Lucky Luciano brutally eliminated the Mafia's old school bosses in New York, paving the way for a new generation of leaders who were eager to explore new criminal ventures. By mid-century, organized crime has spread to almost every major city in America, and it's constantly developed new ways to make a dishonest buck. But the public did not yet recognize the extent of its power and influence.
Hello, ladies and gents. It is an honor to welcome you to the third floor. The exhibits on this floor tell you about the work of the mob, but they also tell you about the cops and how they robbed the world.
Houses, alleys, were coming in and out of Chicago in response to strikes. But Hoover was reluctant to bring the same zeal into the fight against the mafia as
Mobsters even smuggled drugs inside tomato sauce cans from Sicily and distributed them throughout the United States.
corruption was a permanent.
Okay, so we've headed down to the second floor now, which is where we are. I do have to say there's plenty of people in this museum. If you have any questions regarding the mob or the museum itself, they seem quite knowledgeable, and they're pretty strict with regards to COVID. So don't lower that mask of yours. And actually, when you check in to get your ticket, they give you a bottle of Mob Museum hand sanitizer. Of course, I didn't use mine. I saved it as a souvenir. I had my own anyway. I walked around Vegas with my own hand sanitizer. The first U.S. courthouse and post office in Las Vegas, now the Mob Museum, opened in 1933. That's right, this very building we're in was the courthouse and the post office for Las Vegas. The most famous hearing ever held in the second floor courtroom, which is where we're standing right now, occurred on November 15, 1950, when a committee led by Tennessee Senator Estes Kefauver interviewed several witnesses about organized crime involvement in the Las Vegas casino industry. Mob affiliates Mo Sedway, Wilbur Clark, and Lieutenant Governor Cliff Jones were among those questioned. The courtroom has been restored to look as it did when Kefauver's committee met here. By the way, the hearings that you see on the screens here, and what appears to be a hologram image as well, lasted about 30 minutes, and it's very interesting. Obviously, I'm not going to show the whole thing here in the middle of this video, but if you have a chance, and you're visiting the museum, it's a great place to sit down for half an hour and watch that. It was really interesting. Speaking of Bugsy Siegel, he opened the Flamingo Hotel and Casino on December 26, 1946, at a total cost of $6 million. That happens to be where I stayed during this visit in Las Vegas. It was billed as the West's greatest resort hotel. The 105-room property and the first luxury hotel on the Strip was built 4 miles south from downtown Las Vegas. And if you happen to visit the Flamingo or the habitat outside, there's a video of that habitat on the New York channel, you'll see a bust of Bugsy, kind of like immortalizing him here at the Flamingo Hotel. As law enforcement across the nation cracked down on illegal gambling, mobsters cast their eyes towards Las Vegas. Why worry about the next police raid on your illegal gambling hall when you could operate legally in Las Vegas? In the 1940s and 50s, mob-connected individuals were responsible for the bulk of the resorts on the Las Vegas Strip, transforming this remote railroad town into an international gambling destination. Las Vegas was regarded as an open city among mobsters, which meant that any mob syndicate could invest here. They came from all over, including Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Cleveland, Miami, and beyond. This is the Skim Room here at the Mob Museum. That's S-K-I-M, Skim Room. Since the house inherently has the advantage in a casino, owning one can be very profitable. But the mob wasn't satisfied with the legitimate earnings from its Las Vegas casino interests. Mob bosses devised clever schemes to skim a percentage of cash from the casino before it was officially counted. Couriers quietly carried this unreported and untaxed money to the bosses back east. State regulators eventually caught up with these schemes, but not before tens of millions of dollars were smuggled out of Nevada.
They might have been arrested if they stepped foot in Vegas, but that didn't stop them from getting their cut.
As the casino industry grew and law enforcement scrutiny intensified, the mob found it increasingly difficult to operate in Las Vegas. Running big resorts required skills and capital on a scale that the mob could no longer provide, and in the late 1960s, Howard Hughes bought several formerly mob-infested casinos and mainstream companies took notice. Nevada lawmakers changed casino ownership rules to encourage corporate investment. A new generation of gaming entrepreneurs, led by Kirk Kerkorian, Steve Wynn, does that name sound familiar? And Bill Bennett, changed the face of Las Vegas. Public corruption goes hand in hand with organized crime. From paying police officers to look the other way, to buying off politicians to land lucrative contracts, the mob has infiltrated some of America's most essential institutions. The mob collaborated with Jimmy Hoffa's Teamsters Union to finance Las Vegas casino projects. The Chicago outfit got its hands dirty in the 1960 presidential election, and La Costa Nostra families in New York controlled a range of industries from garment manufacturing to cement companies. Mobsters even conspired with the CIA to try to assassinate Cuban strongman Fidel Castro. Here's a chair from a Nevada gas chamber, and it doesn't say anything about being a replica, so this might be the real deal. For the mob, murder was an all-too-frequent solution to internal conflicts. Mob bosses used violence to exert power and eliminate enemies. Up-and-comers displayed brute force to prove their leadership skills, and hitmen earned a living by assassination. This culture of brutality and sudden death exacted a terrible toll on individuals, families, and despite Bugsy Siegel's assertion that we only kill each other, innocent bystanders.
If I make a promise, I will keep it. If I tell you I will be at a certain place, I will be there.
Here we have a look of some hit weapons, including weapons made in prison.
Philadelphia, 1980. Angelo, the gentle Don Bruno.
By the way, this area of the Mob Museum is called the Mob's Greatest Hits. I think that's pretty clever. Okay, I get the ice pick, but a machete? Really? Now these Mob Greatest Hits photos might be a little too graphic for some of you, so if you're a little bit squeamish, take this opportunity to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up. And even if you're not squeamish, why don't you take care of those 3 things right now anyway? So, where do old mobsters go? I think this exhibit here is a good indication of a couple of scenarios that can happen to old mobsters. This display here is called 100 Years of Made Men. The names, faces, and backgrounds vary. The dates span more than a century. The crimes range from bootlegging to illegal gambling, drug trafficking to murder. Each story is different, yet there's a common thread. Men, and occasionally women, lured by money, respect, and power, joined forces to fleece America and eliminate anyone standing in their way. New York Mafia boss John Gotti once remarked, "Don't ever say anything you don't want played back to you someday." But Gotti didn't heed his own advice. His voice was one in a vast chorus of mobsters captured on wiretaps and bugs. After the Kafarva hearings, Americans demanded a more aggressive campaign to bring down the mob. Law enforcement agencies armed themselves with new technologies and techniques, and prosecutors deployed a new law that enabled them to decapitate the nation's most powerful crime syndicates. By the end of the 20th century, the traditional mob was a shadow of its former self. The traditional mob may be on life support, but organized crime still flourishes around the world. No longer centered in neighborhoods or cities, modern crime networks span nations and connect continents. From drug and human trafficking to money laundering and cyber scams, 21st century crime syndicates routinely cross physical and digital borders to execute their elaborate schemes. And the victims aren't all human. Trafficking in endangered and exotic species is a billion-dollar racket. Law enforcement agencies are working together to tackle these global threats, but not every nation is willing or able to challenge powerful crime syndicates. And it just wouldn't be a museum without a museum gift shop, but this one's pretty cool. Yeah, it has your usual shirts, t-shirts, mugs, refrigerator magnets, keychains, but these are all unusual and mob-related. Where else are you going to find this kind of stuff? Not on the Strip and not on Fremont Street, that's for sure. Mob books, mob hats, mob cooking ingredients. So as we come towards the end of the video, I have to say, before I got here, I really wasn't expecting much of the Mob Museum. I came here because I got some requests to come here and I was kind of interested myself, but I was really expecting a tourist trap, but boy was I surprised. This place is really entertaining and educational. I spent about 2 hours here, but I could have easily spent another 2 if I wasn't on such a tight schedule. Coming up next on the New York channel. As many of you know, I spent this last trip in Las Vegas at the Flamingo Hotel and Casino. I'm going to show you my room and tell you what I thought about it. It had its good points, like price, and not so good points, which I'll go into detail during the video. So grab that room key and head on upstairs with me.
You're a douchebag, old man.
I heard so much about Elvis, and I thought he was a nice guy who gave cars away and homes to perfect strangers, but apparently that's not the case. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like, comment, ask some questions, and most importantly, subscribe by clicking on the button on the left. You can visit all of my New York videos by clicking on the top right, or check out my videos on other favorite places to visit by clicking on the bottom right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around the city.